So just how is it possible that agent cubes can be so accessible and make 3D programming and 3D shape creation so easy? There have been many very exciting tools that probably some of you know, but the problem with many of those is that they're very tricky to access if you're a beginning 3D person. So Agent Cubes actually changes this landscape by introducing this idea that we call gentle slope 3D. What does that actually mean? Gentle slope 3D means that how about we don't have to start with 3D, but instead start with 2D and gradually work our way towards 3D. And by doing so, making 3D much, much more accessible. Let me illustrate. So we have created here a very simple game called Sokoban. You can see me now using the cursor keys, moving a character around, pushing these boxes. The goal of the game would be to push these boxes that you can see here onto the targets. But it's a two-dimensional game. Even though we have the kinds of camera controls here that we can see, there are some 3D options, but all the objects are flat. So let's actually start to explore how we can change that. I'm going to start with the wall. So I'm selecting the wall, and I'm going to pick a different kind of shape. So instead of making the wall just a flat tile, I'm going to make it a cube. So that's already a bit more three-dimensional. Now as you can see, our boxes are still flat. So I'm going to also select the crate. And I'm also going to change its shape. So instead of it being a tile, it's going to be a cube. It's going to be made out of wood again. And I'm going to pick this texture called crate. So now it has become three-dimensional as well. And the game, of course, is still playable. But our main character, the red lobster, is still a flat object. So what I'm going to do here is I'm also going to edit it. So it has a three-dimensional representation which is completely flat at the moment. A simple thing I can do now is to just inflate this shape. And as you can see, it's becoming quite a bit more interesting. So in just very little bit of work, we turned the shape that we created with a more Photoshop two-dimensional kind of interface into a three-dimensional shape, which may consist, of thousands of polygons, but we don't care. All we do care is that it has a three-dimensional representation. So I'm going to save that. And we can now see our character being three-dimensional as well. So if I run our game, and I made a mistake pushing these boxes on top of each other. But now let's think about the final piece of my game here, which is the target. The targets are still looking two-dimensional. So let me change those as well. So what I could do is to inflate my target a little bit. I want to make it look maybe like a bowl. So I'm going to inflate the entire target positively. So I'm going to turn it into a bit of a positive sphere. But now I will select just a small section, maybe just this color here. I'm using the magic wand to select this, and I'm inflating it negatively to pull it down. That was almost a bit too much, so I'm going to inflate it a bit back up. And I'm going to save it. And now we have a much more interesting looking kind of shape. I'm going to zoom out again here. I'm going to look where my actual character is, the lobster. I'm going to cheat a little here. I'm going to move it back here. And now another thing I can do is actually I can now enter first person view. So my lobster is selected. I click the camera. Here's my lobster. Now you're going to move around in this world. And that's how we can now play our game. I should adjust the camera a little bit more closer to it so that I can actually see my lobster a little better. This is almost too fast, so I'm going to slow it down a bit. I could now push these boxes around. And that's my three-dimensional game. And so this illustrates how we created a process where we start with just two-dimensional representations and gradually move from a two-dimensional to a three-dimensional world. We can even add additional pieces such as a sky dome to make the environment look a bit more interesting. So we can, for instance, add this one. And now if I move around here, we see a fairly compelling three-dimensional world that we just created in a couple of seconds. So thank you very much.